Hello and welcome to episode 11 of The Wind-Thieved Hat. I've enjoyed every one of the conversations I've had in the making of this series, but I think this is one of my favourites. It's with the sculptor Ivan Black. Ivan's work is probably best described as kinetic sculpture. I first saw it on Instagram, where his videos often attract hundreds of thousands of views. His constructions are magical and mesmerising. They often have a fluid, dynamic form which behaves in rhythmical and beautifully unpredictable ways. His sculptures have been shown in galleries all over the world and I just can't stop watching them. On a cold, damp day, I rode out west on my motorbike to Ivan's place in Pembrokeshire in West Wales. We sat in his kitchen and talked about his life as an artist, about how he came to do what he does, and about an extraordinary burst of creativity over just a few days when he was younger, which still informs his work now. So why not make yourself a cup of tea, bring up Ivan Black's sculpture on Instagram, and sit back and enjoy episode 11 of The Wind-Thieved Hat. Hello Ivan.
Hi.
Thank you for inviting me down to your kitchen here in Pembrokeshire.
You're very welcome.
Tucked away in West Wales. You didn't grow up here though, in Wales, did you? Where did you grow up?
No, I grew up in London and moved here in 2001, age about 29 at the time, yeah.
It's quite a different environment to London, isn't it?
It's very different, but it's sort of a home from home. I spent all my childhood holidays here and I knew some kids growing up who, are now established here, and I always loved it. I never wanted to go back to London, I always wished that I'd grown up here, so I wanted that for my own children when I started a family.
And what was your early life like in London? Whereabouts were you growing up?
I grew up in West London.
Okay.
Yeah, in a very sort of artistic family. My mum was an artist, although the kids kind of put that on hold quite a bit. And I had interesting sort of Bohemian parents. My father was an oriental carpet dealer of some repute. So the house was full of these amazing, Eastern works of art and full of art and very kind of creative and slightly Bohemian atmosphere.
Sounds wonderful.
It was, yeah. But I didn't love, growing up in London really. It was not for me. I much preferred being out in the countryside on the beach and so on, playing in the woods with my Pembrokeshire friends.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You've always had an inclination towards nature then?
Yes, yeah. I've always loved, being outdoors and playing around, making fires, camping, whittling, that kind of thing.
We'll talk a little bit about the influence of nature on your work, I think, which is evident. But I'm curious about your parents then. So your mum worked as an artist between looking after you and you.
Yeah, well, more before we came along, really.
Okay.
Because she then threw herself into being a parent to eventually 4 kids. But there is an interesting story about how my mum ended up in the UK, because she's from Quebec.
Okay.
And she was actually married before she left Quebec, and at art college in Montreal, and she won a competition in 1969, I believe. The competition was to find the most promising contemporary artists in Quebec, and she won second prize, and quite a large sum of money at the time. I think it was $2,000, which in 1969 was enough money to buy a house in Montreal.
Wow.
It was a small fortune.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the piece of art that she made was, in many ways, I think of it as a sort of a kinetic sculpture. It was a painting, and it kind of looked like an oil spill, if you like, on water, that kind of quite psychedelic, kind of different colours, and it had these coloured gels and and a very early computer, a punch card computer, that rotated a series of coloured lights behind these gels to kind of make the colours of the painting change. So she won this award, and then, having fallen out of love with the lifestyle more than her husband, really, because he was much more of a hippie than she was, she decided to get on a plane and come to the UK. She knew one person in London, and that person introduced her to my dad, and then that was how they got together. So I sort of trace, in a way, my existence back to this Kinetic painting that my mum did in 1969. You know, without that, maybe I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, in more ways than one.
Yeah, exactly.
As a physical being and as an artist as well,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah.
Does that work still exist?
It does, and I actually went on a sort of a pilgrimage to try to find it. Last time I was in Quebec, age about 17. We'd kind of gone as a family, but I said, right, I'm going to go off. I had this idea, this plan to go to the Museum of Contemporary Art in Quebec and find the painting.
Track it down.
Yeah, and I managed to, you know, to get there and get to the museum and find a person to talk to, and unfortunately they said that the curator in charge of the permanent collection, because the painting was, you know, in storage, not on display. We managed to find it in the big catalogue, you know, was away for 2 weeks or something. So unfortunately there was nobody who could take me down to show me the painting. Man. I know, but maybe another time.
But you know it's still there.
I know it's still in the collection. It'd be great to get hold of it.
Yeah,
bring
that'd
it
be
back.
awesome. That'd be awesome.
Maybe swap it for one.
Yeah, do a little trade.
Yeah.
Well, if the curator of the Quebec Gallery's listening, maybe it's an idea.
Yeah.
And it's interesting about your dad selling. So your dad sold Persian carpets.
That's right.
Yeah. And they're quite something, aren't they? I was travelling back from London the other day, and the bus happened to stop outside a Persian carpet shop for quite a long time, Roadworks or something. And I found myself quite entranced by all the work and the detail and the stories within this carpet. Do you think it influenced you?
I think so, but I sort of look back, you know, retrospectively, maybe, you know, you sort of don't always know what influences you, I think.
Sure.
But I look back and think, you know, question, could that have been a factor? Because there's a lot of geometry in some of the tribal, you know, weavings that were in the house. My father, interestingly, and I think that this also has influenced me, was quite an idiosyncratic sort of, he was a bit of a pioneer in the carpet business. So there's a famous kind of milestone in the appreciation and business of Persian and otherwise Oriental carpets, is that my father and his partner at the time had a very famous exhibition in the Whitechapel Gallery called The Undiscovered Kilim. And prior to that, kilims had not really been thought of as an art form worthy of, you know, a market in the Oriental carpet business. And sometimes when you bought pile carpets or imported them, they would come wrapped in old kilims because they weren't considered to have the same value. But my father thought differently, and he collected a whole, you know, collection of what he thought were amazing works of art, and then had this exhibition, which was curated by Nicholas Sirota, amazingly.
Really? Right.
And there was a book that came with it, and the exhibition was a huge success, and the market in kilims exploded. You know.
So what is a kilim?
A kilim is like a flat weave carpet, so rather than a tufted carpet, it's like more like a tapestry weave, you know, where they...
I see.
They call them flat weaves. And so our house was full of these amazing carpets, a lot of which are now in museums. And, you know, now some of them are hugely valuable. If only you'd kept a couple of the best ones tucked away. But it was an amazing, I think it was something that had made a lasting impression on me. You know, I loved the carpets and still do. And there's a nostalgia now about carpets, and the smell of the carpet shop was was very particular, and I can call it to mind, even when I talk about it. In my brain, somehow there's a recollection of that smell and atmosphere. And then one of my first jobs as a young man was working in my dad's workshop doing carpet restoration, which was quite a fascinating process. And that involved a lot of, carpets are made from almost like a pixel kind of grid of points of colour that when you build up you get, the larger, more complex picture. And arguably that's something that might have influenced my work because, I use that technique a lot, repetitions of kind of simple elements that, it's when you build up the structure using the simple elements, that's when the complexity emerges. So I think I was probably influenced and also influenced by my dad's propensity to try to always strike out on his own and, break his own ground, find his own paths into things and not be kind of led or influenced too much by the pack, if you like.
So you had that early exposure to the art world as well. You saw your dad's Killam's in the Whitechapel Gallery, and your mum had made work and been reasonably successful. So I guess you had a sense that it wasn't a sort of a removed world. It was one that maybe you could one day be a part of.
Yeah, I guess so. And I always enjoyed making things, and I'm sure that was encouraged in my childhood. My mum says that, Lego was the big thing, wasn't it? And again, ironically, that's a sort of building up of complexity from simple elements. And apparently, whenever my mum asked me for Christmas or birthday, what do you want? It was always Lego. That was just the standard response. I could never have too much. Just wanted more and more tools to work with, I suppose, more elements to add to my creations. And I'd kind of make the design on the box once and then take it apart and then freestyle.
Always the best way.
Always. I wasn't one of those kids who'd kind of make the models and then put them on the shelf. I always wanted to.
You wouldn't glue them together. That's what some kids do.
Definitely not.
It's not the point, is it?
No, definitely not. Yeah.
So you were as a kid you were making stuff already. Putting things together and.
Yeah, in a playful way, I guess. I wasn't eyeing up a career in the arts at that stage at all. I don't even think that the things that I was making showed, that much promise. I do remember I used to have this strange fascination with making sphinxes out of Lego, which, was pretty left field, I guess.
Sphinxes?
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. Right. Some Egyptian influence there.
Yeah, well, I don't know where it came from. I think I probably made one and then thought, that was interesting, and then ended up making another couple of sphinxes.
The Lego Sphinx niche.
Yeah, it's pretty niche, definitely. But I guess you could say that it was always attempting to find different ways to use things, different little avenues, unexpected, unpredictable.
And did you study art at college? Or?
Yeah, so then I realised that it was something that I would want to, would be interested in doing. Comes that period at school, doesn't there, where there's suddenly pressure to think about what you want to do with your life. And I didn't really know for quite a while. And then
Who does at that?
No. And then this pottery class started at school, and me and a couple of my friends joined the pottery class, largely because the teacher was very attractive. Young woman, and it was an all boys school.
Okay.
And so we joined it for a laugh. I hadn't displayed huge promise at art, I could draw a bit, but not like the people who could draw, the ones who had an obvious natural talent for it. But we joined the pottery class, and it was just immediately obvious that I had some skill in making things, which is interestingly, quite a different skill from drawing. as soon as I got my hands on some clay, it was easy, it just seemed easy, and I could see everyone else was really struggling, and to me it was just flowing. It was just, straight away. It was like I hadn't had to learn it, it was just like I felt like I knew how to manipulate the material.
Right.
Yeah, and it was a sort of quite a moment. It's like suddenly you find your thing, like, wow, this is actually, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do.
Wow. How old were you when you...
I guess I was 16 or 17, I think.
Right. That's a good age to suddenly find a thing, isn't it?
Yeah, great age.
This could be something for me.
Yeah, and I just knew then, almost immediately, it wasn't like, it was just like, oh great, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a sculptor. And around the same time I started playing around with wire, actually, and it was at a friend's house. I don't know what happened. I think we were, smoked a few joints and we found this roll of fuse wire and, sitting around stoned, playing is, key, isn't it? That's really where you kind of experiment and find your milieu. So we started making simple things out of wire initially, just like really basic stuff like 2-dimensional flowers and I don't know, but it quickly kind of evolved, and then I started, then I realised I could pull a bit out and make it 3-dimensional, and I think that's always been an element of my working kind of method, is that things evolve. I always want to see what I can do next. Like if I can do that, maybe I can do this, or this suggests, that there's something else. There's another piece to make. That is an evolution of this piece. Yeah. So I was playing around with wire, and then one day I just decided to try and make something with separate elements connected in some way, and it was kind of like a mobile, my first mobile, I guess. And then a family friend saw this little mobile and said, "Have you ever heard of Alexander Calder?" And I said, "No." "Who's that?" And, yeah, and then looked him up, and it was like, oh my God, this is just amazing. But not only is it amazing, and I love it, but I'm not going to be able to do that now, because it's already been done. And that was like a big thing for me, and always has been, really. There's always been like, where's my little corner of it, I felt like he'd done it so well and so, brilliantly, and I loved it so much that I didn't even want to try and kind of emulate or copy. And although I was much inspired by his work, I went more then into making kind of 3-dimensional wire sculptures, and they became more and more complicated, and then eventually I started making articulated wire sculptures with, like figurative pieces and portraits and self-portraits, and often with moving parts. Eventually I designed these quite sophisticated, I thought, ball and socket joints all made out of wire and connected by a spring,
Right.
and I made these kind of crazy articulated sculptures, but they were really kind of demanding, difficult to work out, and consequently quite challenging to complete a piece like that, because it would almost hurt my brain trying to think about how I was going to finish it, So I'd have things that were half made for a year, and then I'd kind of muster the motivation to make myself do the other half of it.
You must have learnt a lot, though, about materials in that
period. I learnt a lot. And then, so I'm getting ahead of myself a bit. So, after having discovered that wire was a medium that I really enjoyed, it was clean, I could, it was compact. All I needed was a roll of wire and some pliers, and there was no mess really. I could do it in my bedroom, which I did a lot. Sit in my bedroom and make little things out of wire. Then I started joining them, trying to solder bits together, but that was really hard, because especially with copper wire, you make one joint and then try and make another joint and melt the last joint. So that was difficult.
Particularly if you're smoking a joint at the same time.
Exactly,
It
doesn't help. But yeah, I made some interesting things, and then decided, cemented my plan that was what I wanted to do, and then and then found out that you could do a foundation course in art where you would go and try lots of different disciplines, and found out there was a really good one in Middlesex Polytechnic at the time. So I went and applied for that, and amazingly, I think I was one of few applicants who came with pieces of sculpture. Most people were coming with portfolios of drawing and so on.
Sure.
And anyway, I got my offer. I got an unconditional offer, which I think was probably the norm. It wasn't that I was special. It's just that they didn't care too much about what academic subjects that you took for A-level. They were more interested in, what you might do in the arts.
Sure.
So yeah, and then I had probably another year of A-levels, and I did English and French and art, and was quite interested in all the subjects, and then did very badly. I got a D for art, which is interesting, because I thought I did some of my best drawing in my art A-level.
It's not uncommon though, is it, for people who go on to be professional artists to do really badly in art A-level? I've found.
It's funny, yeah. Damien Hirst famously got an E, didn't he? So
that's right.
He did one better than me. And then afterwards my art teacher said, it's a shame we didn't make one of your pieces a piece of sculpture. And it's like, now you tell me.
Right.
Not that it mattered at all. So I went to Middlesex, and then it was a mixture of drawing and then printmaking and clay and wood and wire and all sorts. And it was amazing, and I really enjoyed it. And I continued to kind of be interested in making kinetic things. And I remember going into the workshop, and they had a bunch of wire, and then they had this machine, this amazing, miraculous machine called a spot welder, where you just cross the wires in between the kind of calipers of the machine and press a handle, and it would melt the two wires together. And to me, that was like, oh my God, where's this machine? It could have been invented, to help me do the things that I wanted to do with wire. Right. So couldn't believe that. But also did, all kinds of other work, all of which I enjoyed, and all of which, just felt so natural. Everything I picked up just felt right, I would say that, objectively, I was finding a lot of it a lot easier than other people on the course, the things I was making. I was getting good results in most of the things I was trying, I guess. But I was also very bloody-minded and stubborn and struggling with the pressure to to do what the tutors wanted me to do. And that's been a bit of a theme of my life. Not that, I wasn't deliberately difficult, I don't think. It was just that I always wanted to do things my way, and that didn't really chime with, with being the teaching environment, I suppose. So I did argue a lot with my tutors.
It's probably stood you in quite good stead though, hasn't it? A certain belief in your own direction is something that one needs, I think, to navigate a professional art career.
It's
not always easy, is it?
It's not easy, and you get challenged a lot at college to justify why you're doing what you're doing and so on. And it was funny, it was much more of a gut thing. It wasn't it wasn't a conscious decision, like, I'm going to do my own thing. It was just like a feeling of discomfort when I was being pushed into directions that didn't feel, like where I would naturally find myself, or being criticised for, doing work that they didn't consider to be, I suppose, commercial. Or I know that they were trying to give you a grounding in the arts that would help you to confront those difficulties that you mentioned, the difficulties of the market and the questions that the market might ask, and you know, I just wasn't really interested in going down that road of, you know, trying to do work to, you know, to please whatever the conventional wisdom might be. And then I look back to my dad and see how he kind of forged his own path, and think that, you know, it's probably genetic, isn't it? As well as, you know, it's the nature and nurture things, you know, grown up in that culture, and also inherited his, you know, genetically his maybe idiosyncrasies.
Yes. And so after college, if we sort of